If you're like me, then there are certain things you simply cannot afford. Beachfront property, sports cars, eating too much dairy. You might also think that the Neo Geo is something you cannot afford, or that simply isn't worth it. With the home console version known as the AES having games with ridiculous prices, a lot of people just say, well, I guess that's not something I'll be getting, and then they give up on the Neo Geo altogether, assuming it's only for crazy money people with cash to spare. Classic mistake, if you ask me, because what you can do, what some people do, and what I would recommend you do, is go with one of the alternatives. To which some of you might say, I did go with one of the alternatives. It's called not going broke. All right, smarty pants, I hear ya, but luckily there's a lot of different options for playing Neo Geo, and even collecting it, depending what the word collect means to you. But before we talk about how to collect for it / acquire it, let's first figure out if you would even like it. A great starting point for figuring out if something is worth it, not just in relation to money spent, but also potential time spent, which luckily the Neo Geo is very time friendly, one of the most time considerate platforms you'll ever come across. In fact, check out this note I got from mine one time. What a sweetheart. The Neo Geo was and is an arcade machine, so shocker, it has arcade games. Games designed to be immediately engaging, provide quick bursts of gameplay, and then send you on your way. Or, make you want to play it again. In fact, probably make you want to play it again. Who needs a bathroom break when Fatal Fury is better than dry undies anyways? A lot of fun games on the Neo Geo, and ironically, what used to be something you had to leave your home as a child to go play is now a perfect fit to have in your home as an adult. With the limited time adults have, something that can provide short bursts of gameplay is likely going to sound pretty ideal. I'm sure many of you would agree. You know how I always talk about those 15 to 20 minutes of dead time before you go to bed, where you end up just staring at your games? Well, you can play Neo Geo instead. Oh, okay, you've become attached. That said, the Neo Geo doesn't just have being time-friendly going for it in its favor. After all, that's not the only thing required to make you like something. Getting slapped in the face is pretty time-friendly, but doesn't mean you'll like it. The Neo Geo has a reputation for a few things that I'd like to focus on. Impressive 2D visuals and animation, fighting games, and the Metal Slug series. If you're a fan of any of those things, you're probably going to love the Neo Geo. By just watching some of the footage I'm sharing in this video, these games, being arcade games, are designed to sell themselves, with the original idea being that you'd walk past them in an arcade, get a brief glimpse, and think, alright, this looks cool. I was sold on some of my other games in a different way. Let me tell you though, it's rare that I meet a retro gamer who isn't into 2D arcade games. Fighting games, sure, they can be hit or miss with people, but the Neo Geo has plenty of other types of games too, and one of the things I love about the Neo Geo that doesn't always get mentioned is that practically every single game on it has a two-player option, which once again goes back to them being arcade games, making the Neo Geo an excellent choice if you're playing with a friend. Sometimes I see people say that it can be hard to find a game on the Neo Geo that isn't fun to play, a problem most other consoles don't have. But considering you can play just about every single Neo Geo game with a friend, I think that rings true. I mean, just check out this game Ninja Commando here. It's almost never mentioned in people's top 10 lists, wasn't made by a prestigious developer, and yet it can be an absolute blast to play with a friend, or by yourself, because, that can happen. And if Neo Geo can't get friends to come over, I don't know what will. Maybe trying to be a nice person to be around? Nah, Metal Slug is better than that. Speaking of which, did someone say Metal Slug? A series fans will always show up for. Possibly the most popular series on the platform, I consider Metal Slug to be part of the trifecta of run and gun games, among the ranks of Contra and Gunstar Heroes. And for as great as the run and gun genre is, as synonymous as it is with retro gaming, I just don't think there's enough games in the genre. I've always said that. Sure, there's some lesser known ones, but if you haven't played Metal Slug and you're a fan of run and gun games, you gotta at least try it. Not trying it would be like saying you're a fan of yellow fruit but never tried a nanner. The Metal Slug games showcase the type of 2D sprite work and animation that the Neo Geo is capable of. The weapons feel powerful, the animations of blasting stuff are always very detailed and satisfying, there's constant little bits of humor and extras you can find if you look closely, and I've always found that the difficulty is pretty much perfect. It's tough for sure, but considering how many times the average player will want to play through this, it feels just right to me. You'll get destroyed your first time, but probably want to keep coming back to it. If you're looking for longer, adventure-style games on the Neo Geo, well, not only will you not find any, but it doesn't really make sense to be looking for them on something like the Neo Geo anyways, since, yes, I've said it a million times, it's an arcade machine. It's not what it was meant for. You wouldn't look for groceries in the toilet, would ya? You're 2 steps ahead there, Sparky. But the reason I feel such a need to emphasize the Neo Geo as an arcade machine is because I see people thinking of the Neo Geo first and foremost as an expensive home console when that isn't what it was supposed to be from the start. Consoles like the Super Nintendo and Sega Genesis were made to be home consoles from the start. The Neo Geo absolutely was not. It was designed to be an arcade cabinet that would only be bought by arcade owners or various public places, in order to use them for repeated public use, in order to make a profit off of them. It only became a home console made available to the general public once there was enough demand to release a home console version as a niche, let me emphasize this, niche product for a small minority of people who could actually afford/justify such a purchase. The makers of the Neo Geo, SNK, were not trying to position this as something that your average household could afford, like Sega and Nintendo did with their consoles. I think this is all important to keep in mind when thinking about why the Neo Geo was and still is as expensive as it is in some of its forms, because it's hard to be excited to spend money on things that you think are stupid for costing what they do. When's the last time you saw someone pay their bills and say, "I love it"? But speaking of spending money, now's the part of the video where we talk about the way to get the Neo Geo for cheaper. I'll be going through quite the range, with options available for just about every budget there is, including the ever-popular this kind of budget. The first option is to, ironically, just buy an actual Neo Geo arcade cabinet. Because these were so widespread back in the day, they're not as scarce and as expensive as some might think. Also, they use interchangeable cartridges, much like a traditional home console, so you can still collect different games for it. The downside, of course, is that it's enormous and heavy, almost like a refrigerator. For the folks who say they don't have enough room for a CRT TV, this is basically nightmare fuel. What if you just got rid of your refrigerator, though? I mean, would you miss it if it turned into a Neo Geo cab? But perhaps a bigger issue than space is the problem most arcade cabinets have. They break or have issues, and most people already dedicate enough time to fixing things that have issues as it is. For example, life. Which leads to my next option, which is to get a consoleized Neo Geo unit. Now, stick with me here, because this is where people can get easily confused. I'm not talking about the commercial Neo Geo product that we talked about earlier, that's crazy expensive and is called the AES. What I'm talking about is fans who have taken the original arcade, which is known as the MVS, taken out the hardware and turned it into a unit that can be used like a home console, which is pretty common, and the reason is because the game cartridges are much cheaper. And in case you're wondering, no, the MVS and AES cartridges are not interchangeable, although there are adapters you can get. The consoleized MVS unit is the route I went years ago because the game cartridges were so much cheaper. Because I'm sure some people are curious and going to ask, I'll go ahead and share what mine is. This is a wooden version sold by Analog Interactive years ago. That's right, Analog Interactive, those dirty dogs. Before they got into FPGA hardware, they were putting original Neo Geo hardware into wooden consoles. And don't anybody dare accuse me of bragging. I wanted this thing for years and saved up a long time to get it. Just be happy for me. Plus, when I want to brag, you all know I got much better stuff to brag about, like my enviable bread bag clip collection. Speaking of which, some of you have been saying that because of me, you've started your own competing bread bag clip collections. You're stepping into dangerous turf, buddy. If you wake up one morning and all your bread bag clips are gone, I'm not saying it was me, but I'm not saying it wasn't me either. If your nanners are all gone too, it probably was me. Now, unfortunately, MVS games aren't as cheap as they used to be, as tends to happen with these older games as the years go by, as well as more bootleg carts being put out, so watch out for those. As a result, a lot of people will get these multi-carts that are pretty ubiquitous, or even a flash cart as a way to fill out their library. I tend to not recommend the Neo Geo CD personally because it's the only option that has loading times, with the games being on CDs. However, the CDZ model speeds up load times, and it is official Neo Geo hardware that allows you to collect individual games. So it is going to be a viable solution for some people, and I've heard from plenty of those who are really happy with it. By the way, you'll notice me using the CD model's controller here, even though I don't own the console. I actually think the controller for it is really awesome, and luckily it can be used with other Neo Geo hardware. But if you're looking for a different route, there's all sorts of devices that are preloaded with games that you can buy, which vary in terms of price, quality, and people's opinions of them. I'd personally say that MVS-X is probably the most intriguing option among these. But going even cheaper than that, you could get something like a compilation disc. Odds are you've got either a PSP, PS2, or Nintendo Wii already. Now, keep in mind that these aren't perfect, but for the price, it's hard to complain. As of this video, they're about $20 each, and it looks like there's some listings that are even cheaper. You can also purchase the games on various online storefronts. Granted, this means digital purchases, which not everyone is a fan of, but hey, it's an option and they tend to pop up on most services. Last but not least, if you're looking to dirty dog it, you can always just emulate the games. It's supported pretty well, and from what I can tell, the games play perfectly fine. Sure, you're not really collecting Neo Geo games that way, but not everyone cares about that, and not everyone needs to care. The main thing is to play Neo Geo games, or at least try them out, and as I've outlined, there are clearly a ton of different ways to do it. So yes, the Neo Geo is worth it. Give it a shot if you haven't already, and odds are most of you will absolutely love it. If you've already gotten aboard the I love the Neo Geo train, I'd be curious to hear which games are your favorites, and if you watched this video to help determine whether or not the Neo Geo is for you, and you decided it is, let me know which option you think you're going to pursue. I'd love to hear about that. So, for those responses, in addition to anything else you'd like to say, leave a comment down below, and I will see ya in the next video.
He's the retro bird, yeah, and he's talking about video games. He's the retro